Oh, mom. We got 5 minutes. 5 minutes. All right. This might be loud, so bear with me. All right. Sounds on. Nice. Oh, didn't want to do that. We're gonna listen to sweet songs. So yeah, everybody get the blood pumping, get jacked up. You could fold them so I could see them. That'd be great. You don't need to fill them out now, but that's fine if you do. We'll fill them out later. Grab your name tent if you haven't done so already, please, up in the front. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. All right, it's 11 o'clock. Let's get rolling. I'm sure you guys have other things that you'd likely want to do other than be here. If you haven't grabbed your name tent, grab it. It's at the front. We're gonna need it for later. It's also how I track participation for the class, right? Because if your name tent's not there, that means you're here, right? Okay, great. Anyway, welcome to Statics. I am Dr. D, and we're just gonna jump right into it. So what are we doing today? Well, before we jump into it, let's pray. Let's slow it down for a second. Father, thank you so much for bringing us together this morning. Thank you for the rain, even though it's not typically the weather we want, it's definitely the weather we need. Pray that you would help us all to stay focused this summer, help us to keep our eyes on what is important and to make it through. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, so what we're going to do today, lots of stuff, right? First of all, we'll do the who, what, where, when, why, how of the class. We'll talk about polar bears, and then we are jumping in to topic 1 today. Why? Because you guys, in case you guys weren't aware, this is a 7-week class. So that means one topic every week, except for topic 4, which is 2 weeks. And we will talk about that in a minute. But it's going to be fast and furious, something about family, all that stuff. Great. First thing, Dr. D-ism for the day. The prerequisite for success in life is showing up. If you don't show up, you won't succeed. Okay? That is, quote, you can quote me on that one for sure. I had some friends in college who were on the track and field team. They were one of the best 4x100 meter relays that you had ever seen. They made it to the NCAA regional meet, and they made it to finals. And one of the members of the relay team couldn't find his shoes, and they didn't show up to race time, and so they couldn't race. So you got to be there. You got to be here, all right? So talk about me. I'm Dr. Mike DiGregorio. Like I said, you guys can call me Dr. D. I have a PhD, so I'm not technically, I guess, what most people would call a real doctor, right? But that's fine. I also have my professional engineer's license here in the state of Arizona. I went to Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania. So I'm from New Jersey originally. I went to college in Easton, Pennsylvania, where I got my bachelor's in mechanical engineering. And when I was done there, I worked at this place called Picatinny Arsenal, which is a military base. I did fuse design for mortar shells. I was working on training rounds, and I did that for about 3 years as a mechanical engineer while I was working on my master's degree also in mechanical engineering at nights from a place called Stevens Institute of Technology, whose mascot is the Ducks, which is great. And my focus there was mostly thermal fluids. But yeah, for those of you who don't know, the fuse is the part of the munition that begins the explosive, which is the part that makes it, right? It is the only job that I've ever had where if something doesn't explode, you get yelled at, which is a really fun way to turn it on its head, right? After that, I went to this small school down the street from here for my PhD, also in mechanical engineering. where I focused on control systems. And so my PhD thesis was on human hand biomechanics. So how do humans use their hands? What kind of reflexes do we have so we can port that into a robotic or an artificial hand, right? Robotics and prosthetics, which was a pretty cool, pretty cool. After that, I got a job in North Carolina at Wake Forest University, specifically at the Wake Forest University Baptist Medical Center, which is still the longest name of any employer that I have ever had. I was an orthopedic research engineer for 3 years there. And so my boss and I were the only engineers that worked in that department, and it was super fun. We ran all of the verification testing for any of the orthopedic research studies that they had. So we did low back pain studies. I did a study on a cadaver where we measured the amount of force that is applied through the pelvis during a full hip replacement, which is crazy. Because I don't know if you guys have ever seen any of the orthopedic surgery videos or anything, but it is like carpentry on a human. It is very violent. It is very violent. But also beautiful in a way. Anyway, after that, I moved back to Tempe, or back to Arizona, not Tempe. I was working in Tempe at this place called BioRec, where I did accident reconstruction. And so if you ever watch Forensic Files or Dateline, the people that say, yes, those injuries could have happened due to the fact that they were traveling at 50 miles an hour and we saw this sort of deformation in the car. That was that kind of work. It sounds super exciting and looks great when you're watching it on TV. When you are doing it, it is not, and it is controlled by law firms. And so it is extremely legalistic and not for me. And so was there for about a year until I came here. And so I plan on being here until the end of time and space, which, depending on who you talk to, could be very soon or could be a long time from now. So who knows? But I've taught all of these different classes over here. I'm currently the assistant dean of engineering, so my teaching load is pretty much non-existent. You guys got lucky that I was available to teach this class this summer. That's what we'll go with for now. You guys can tell me at the end of the semester whether or not that was a fair assessment. Any questions so far on any of this stuff? No, we're all good? Okay, still have your attention maybe? We'll see. Here's a picture of my family from our Christmas card. This is my wife. She teaches 7th grade English at Chrisman High School in Queen Creek, because that's where we live, in Queen Creek. So basically, drive towards New Mexico and you'll eventually get there. I commute about an hour each way, but I drop both my kids off at school in the morning, so it's probably closer to 2 hours when all is said and done. I get to campus around 9, typically because of that. This is my 2 sons. Harrison is actually the older one. He is 9, and he has Down syndrome. He is super, dude. He loves Despicable Me. And so we watch that pretty much once a day. And this is my younger son, Oliver, who's a year younger than Harrison. He is a giant, and I don't really know why. I feel like I am of average height. My wife is maybe 5'2". We have some tall folks in the family, but Harrison is like, he's like midget guy, like super tiny. But anyway, that's us, right? In my free time, I go work out in the morning. I will wake up at 4 o'clock so I can hit a 5 a.m. workout at F45. I have a chronic disposition of being a New York Giants fan, hence to me growing up in New Jersey. At least we didn't get Shadur Sanders, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Or maybe that's bad. Who knows? Right? We'll see. But thank you. I appreciate that. I also a big Marvel fan. If you guys come up to my office, I will say that I believe I have the best decorated office of all of the professors here at GCU. And so feel free to swing by. It's on the 3rd floor. We'll go over that in a second. I also play Xbox sometimes, but my sons are getting older now, and that means that my time on the Xbox has decreased and theirs has increased. So wah for me. All right. All right. Any questions about my personal life, my professional life, anything? No. All right. Fantastic. Moving right along. Okay, some of you might have noticed that I have a webcam going and I started off in Zoom on here. Why? This is streaming directly to YouTube right now. And when class is done, that will be a video on YouTube. So all of the lectures videos will be posted on YouTube after class. So you get that, and there is a playlist link that I put in Halo. So please check it out. I've been told that it is an awesome resource because I don't know if you guys have ever searched for engineering videos to explain stuff on YouTube. They're not very good, I think is the nicest way to say it. So hopefully this will be a little bit better. Why are we doing that? Why am I doing that? Because I told you, I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I go to bed at 9. Okay, I'm old. I'm getting old. My knees hurt all the time. Okay, I'm getting old, and I don't get up past 9 o'clock. And you're going to have questions past 9 o'clock. And so at least you have a video where I worked in a couple example problems or whatever, right? It's just a little bit extra layer, a little bit help. Okay, so where is my office? It's on the 3rd floor of this building over in the, what is that, the east side of the building on the 3rd floor, 344A. That's my office phone number. Good luck calling. Like I mean, I get voicemails there. It's fine. The best ways to contact me are definitely email or Discord. Those are the 2 better ways. I will get back to you really quick. Office hours are tough for me specifically because when I'm not teaching this class, I typically have a ton of meetings. So if you need me and you want to come to my office and you absolutely need help, shoot me a message first so that I can tell you whether or not to waste your time trekking to my office. Okay. If I'm not on campus and you need help, we can do a Zoom meeting or we can do video through Discord or whatever, right? But it's got to be by appointment only for the summer. Okay. But you know, if I am available, I'm totally free for answering questions and whatever you guys need. All right. Halo. I saw some of you guys joining the Discord. Some of you probably already joined it because it's the College of Engineering and Tech Discord that you're probably already in. If you're in there, just drop your name. I will regroup you guys all to an ESG-260 group so you can have your own chat room so you can talk to each other. I like to do that because if you post a question in there and if I can't get to it quick enough, maybe one of your classmates can try to help you out, right? A community of learning, or so they say. All right. So what's the plan for this summer session? Okay, I'm gonna hit you with my expectations first. I expect you guys to come to class on time, ready to learn, meaning that you either have your laptop, your textbook, your notebook. I would definitely recommend taking notes in some fashion, whether you like to do it electronically or old school with pen and paper. Definitely take notes, it'll be helpful. I expect you guys to complete your own original work, right? Don't expect you to not work together. I think working together is fine. I'm a huge proponent of study groups, and if you don't have a study group, I would suggest that you get one, right? But that doesn't mean you have the same write-ups for any assignments, right? Now, the difference being if it's a CLC, right? If it's a group project, which there is one here, please just turn one in. You don't have to turn in like 3 or 4, right? Just the one is fine. And this doesn't really apply here because all of your homework is through Pearson, right? It's all online. And so I'm not so concerned about this here. But please make sure that you know, you're doing you're understanding the concepts in whatever way you can, because you can chegg stuff, right? But that's not going to help you when chegg is not available on quizzes, right? So sacrifice small points for big points later. All right, treat one another with respect, right? So people are going to make mistakes. Heck, I am going to make tons of mistakes in here, typically in the form of spelling errors and typos, right? I try not to make mistakes with problems that I grade or that I do, but that sometimes happens too. If you catch one of my mistakes, let me know, right? If somebody makes a mistake, just be respectful, right? I expect you guys to treat me with respect as well. Ask questions, right? The biggest thing is I know some people don't like to feel like, I think some people feel like they are bugging me or other instructors when they ask questions, and that is the farthest thing from the truth. If you have that question, the chances are that there is somebody else in this room who also has that question, right? And it is important for you to understand things in the moment, right? And so if you need me to stop, if I'm going too fast, please let me know, right? Please let me know. I expect you guys to participate in our classroom activities, right? So here's the thing about participation points. Participation is an action word, right? Which means you need to be doing something, right? And so we'll go over what that looks like, but typically, since you're here anyway, we might as well work together on some stuff. And I'll have you guys do we'll talk about participation in a second. There's a lot of different things I like to do. So, all right, keys to success for this class. That sounds silly. Turn in your assignments. Don't not turn in your assignments. Okay, but it's not perfect. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Okay, nothing. The pursuit of perfection is is futile, right? Turn in your things on time. Remember that sometimes the lesson that you're actually learning might not be one of the academic lessons that you expected to learn. Okay. Ooh, so mysterious, right? If this is not your first statics rodeo, I'm going to ask you guys, if this is second or however many times, to try something different than you did last time. Okay. To do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result is the definition of insanity, right? So, if this is your first statics rodeo, awesome. It's not really a rodeo, it's a class, but man, tough crowd today. Cell phone policy. Okay, normally when I have a smaller class, I bring in like a shoe holder and you put your phones in the shoe holder for the class and then you get them at the end. And that's great, but that's not going to work here because that's probably 3 shoe holders worth of people in here. So I ask you very politely that when we are having class, if you just keep your cell phones away, not on like in a backpack, preferably not someplace where you're tempted to be checking them. I need your attention on the stuff that we're doing. There will be times when cell phones need to come out if we do like a Kahoot or Poll Everywhere or something like that. But for the most part, if you could keep them out of sight, out of mind, I would appreciate it. On days with quizzes, definitely in the backpack, not out. Okay. Also, other Bluetooth-enabled electronics, right? Okay, cool. Or throw your watch in airplane mode, right? If you want to have the time. During quizzes, I will have a timer up here that lets you know exactly how much time is left. Right. Okay. You guys don't need to worry about that flow chart. That's when we have the other thing. All right. What should your expectations from me be? Okay. I will treat you guys with respect. I will grade your assignments in a timely fashion. 1 week with feedback, right? That's the rule. That's what it says in the book. That's what will happen. I will be available either in my office or via Discord and Halo, right? I guess we talked about office hours, appointment only, but shoot me a message. We'll figure something out, right? And I will definitely respond promptly to emails and messages, right? Messages in Halo are what reigns supreme in the GCU universe, right? So they're in the university policy handbook, I believe it says that instructors need to respond to any Halo message within 24 hours. So if you need something, I would hit multiple things. I would put it in Halo. I would hit Discord. I would also send an email. If it's really important, I will probably just get back to you in Halo, right? But make sure you're covering the bases. Like I said, the problem with Halo is Halo doesn't give me a notification. Discord does, okay? So if you shoot me a message in Discord, I will see it and then probably get back to you pretty quickly. Then you might see a follow-up in Halo just because that's how GCU instructs us to communicate with students officially, okay? Do you guys have anything else that you think should be added to this list of expectations that you should have for me? Okay, not seeing anything. We're good. All right. All right. Now, everybody, bite your finger and sign Please come up on the screen with your blood. No, all right. I went too hard on that one. Sorry. All right. Late policy. So you guys have probably seen as many late policies as you've had different professors here. So I will quote to you the GCU handbook, right? All assignments are due before midnight Arizona time on the due dates indicated. Assignments posted after the indicated due dates will be subject to a deduction of 10% of the available points for each day late. No assignment can be accepted for grading after midnight on the final day of class. Technical issues are not a valid excuse for late work unless the problem stems from the GCU servers, which we all know never happens because Halo is the best and everybody loves Halo. And we don't talk bad about Halo. Exceptions to this policy are at the discretion of the instructor. That is an important sentence, right? And we're going to highlight it and underline it, and then we're going to make it. All right. So what's my policy is that I don't accept late work. Why? Because in the real world, people don't accept late work. Deadlines matter, right? If you want to go for that small business grant, right? You want funding. If it's not turned in when you say, they just say sorry. They don't give you 90% of the money you asked for. It's not how that works. And so that's where we're at. Now, all of the Halo deadlines or due dates are accurate as of right now. That is not to say that they won't shift. If they need to shift, I will shift them, okay? But for right now, I went through and everything is in its proper place. That's my best guess based on how fast I think we're going to move through this stuff. We also only have 7 weeks. So remember that if anything gets shifted, there is a finite date to where it can be shifted, right? And still make sense. Okay, cool. Here's a graph of the late policy. You'll notice on the y-axis is your highest possible grade in percent, and on the x-axis is the number of days late you've turned it in, okay? We start out 2 weeks before. You can see a possible grade of 100%. Once we get to 0 days late, we have now hit our step function, and it will be 0 from then on out. Okay, excellent. It's a lot trickier to get Excel to make this graph than you would think, honestly. Okay, any questions so far? Any questions so far? I know I'm moving pretty quick. No? We're all good? Clear? Crystal? Good. Okay, participation points. Great. What if I told you that there was a way that you could get 150 of the 1,000 points just for showing up to class every class period? That sounds it's crazy, right? That's like 15% of our grade. And like, what are you just giving away points? Well, I'm not a liar. I might be crazy, but that's how we're doing participation. Butt in the chair at the beginning of class earns you full points for that class. If you miss a class, you don't get points for that class, right? Makes sense. But while I've got you here, we'll do other things, right? And so time trials, we'll see about time trials. Time trials is a fun group activity where I pitch you in groups against each other to see who can do problems the fastest, which doesn't sound fun when you explain it that way, but it's fun for me. Working problems together in groups. Maybe there's a Kahoot, maybe there's poll everywhere questions, right? Sometimes I like to do concept reviews through poll everywhere, right? And make it a game or Kahoot. Discussion questions in Halo. Sometimes it's, I know Professor Tomford does this, and maybe you get participation points for telling me who your CLC group is for the big project at the end of the semester, because you guys need to tell me that anyway at some point. So anyway, there's a lot of different things that we can do. Maybe we'll work a problem together, like back and forth. I don't know. But as long as you're here, you might as well do something. Okay. So what's the point of this class? Engineers need to be comfortable manipulating vectors mathematically. That is the point of this class. It is not that you know how to do Newton's law when it is equal to 0. That is the vehicle that we are using to teach you about vectors. Vectors are the point of this class, right? Vectors, right? Because vectors are quantity that have magnitude and direction. like forces and torques, velocities, positions, accelerations, right? These are all more mechanically based, right? But, if you're an electrical engineer, working in the complex plane, that's all vectors, right? It's 2D vectors, but it's still vectors. So vectors are important. Understanding how to operate, how to add them, subtract them, combine them, right? That is all this class is about. It's designed to get you comfortable with the idea of how to do vector math. We're using the simplest way, the simplest example of that, which is when everything is balanced. We are in an equilibrium state, and so this is the simplest way to do it, right? Why? Because when you move out of this class, the real world, things aren't always balanced, right? Sometimes they have mass and acceleration. Well, they should always have mass, otherwise it's not an interesting problem. But you get the point, right? We're going to start with the simple case, learn how to do the vector stuff, and then that stuff is going to get built on in your later classes, okay? So this is the pacing that we're going to try to cover stuff in here. Topic 1 is fundamentals of mechanics. That's going to be chapters 1 and 2 from the textbook. That's going to be this week. Next week would be topic 2, equilibrium of a particle. Again, we're going to start with a particle, then we'll move our way up to rigid bodies eventually, right? And so, but we'll start with the simple things and then add to it, right? So we'll talk about that in a second, right? That's chapter 3. Chapter 4 for topic 3, right? Topic 4, analysis of trusses, frames, and machines. That's a big one. That's going to be 2 weeks where we do that, and that's chapters 5 and 6 in the textbook. And chapters 7 and 8 for topic 5 in week 6, and then the last week is center of gravity, centroid, and moment of inertia, right? So that's going to be the final thing we do, right? It's gonna sting. I'm not gonna lie. This is content heavy, okay? And it might feel like I'm going fast because we're going fast, right? But we kind of need to get through everything. So again, really make sure that you're using either this time or before or after class, ask me questions, come to my office, shoot me messages. We got to be really engaging on this. Yeah, Dawson. It's a good question. It is a Monday. It's probably a holiday, so it's just probably one less class that we're going to have. Let me look into that, and maybe that week I might be able to. Let me look into that. That doesn't rub me very well to have a class be not present. You might have noticed that the amount of times the class meets didn't change, right? But the length of the class changed. And that's because whoever set it up originally didn't math correctly and had it set for the amount of time that a typical 15-week class would take. And so you were missing one class every week for 7 weeks. So we fixed it without adding. So that's why it's 2.5 hours 3 times a week. But let me look into the Memorial Day thing, and we'll come to a solution on that, right? Because we'll do something, figure it out. Okay, we're going to talk about the points now. Okay, so here's a pie chart that's not really great because there's supposed to be like a line here. So they use the same. Anyway, it's fine. It's fine. Is it fine? I don't know. Nope. Go back. There we go. We'll just keep going. It's fine. 6 homeworks, each worth 25 points. 1 homework per topic, right? Project plan. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. That's in a couple weeks. That's going to be worth 50 points. Projects and presentation. So you have a final project and a final presentation worth 200 points. We've got 3 quizzes at 150 points each. Now, talk about this right now. Quizzes aren't cumulative in the sense that it's not like midterm final, right? There's a very set part of, if you went into Halo, I have already told you quiz 1 is topics 1 and 2. Quiz 2 is topics 3 and 4, right? And then the final quiz will be everything else from there on, right? The the funny thing is that it's not necessarily cumulative. However, the skills that we learn throughout will build, right? And so it all it's funneling you towards being able to do that thing at the end. And then participation, which is 150, we already talked about, right? So this is how this adds to 1,000. Halo has 1,000 points. I didn't break Halo in doing any of this, right? Halo is not harmed in any way, so please don't worry. Okay. Any questions on the points, the assignments as of right now? As we go through like the projects and the project plan and the presentation and everything, I will walk you through like the rubric and my expectations for those things, so you have a better chance of being successful at those assignments. Homeworks are kind of the homeworks, and we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, homeworks. Homeworks are going to be turned in using the Pearson online platform. The due dates are correct in Halo. Already went over that. You will have unlimited attempts during that time to do it, right? You can go through the homework as many times as you want. I would recommend, so after today's class, you guys should have enough to start that homework, right? And after homeworks are going to be due on Thursday night at 11:59 p.m. The reason I'm doing that is because we're going to take quizzes on Thursdays, and I would like for you to have started or completed the homework prior to the quiz if possible, because I know a lot of people tell me that the quizzes and the homeworks don't seem to be related, but they are. I promise you they are. I promise. It says they'll lock. They're going to lock in the sense that you can't turn it in for points after the due date. They will still be open so you can do study attempts. Okay. If you need more problems to study from, the whole textbook is available to you through Halo. And there are so many problems in there that you can't possibly do all of them in 7 weeks. Maybe 8, but not 7. All right. Cool. How you guys doing? All right. Maybe. All right. All right. I guess any questions, comments, concerns, anything? No. I'm a little concerned. Did everybody pick up their name tags? No. Please come get it if you haven't. I'm not going to lie. That pile of name tags makes me a little bit concerned. Not for you guys, but for the viewers at home. I will try not to drink one energy drink per class, but I can't promise. Jane. Yes. That is a great question. No, I am not going to provide any additional study materials for that. However, the way that I have the class planned, we are going to do so many problems in here that you guys should have enough. I would also recommend, like I said, the end of the chapter problems from the textbook are a really good way to study, right? Mhm. It is in Halo under course resources. So if you go under course resources, or is it class resources? I forget what class, go to class resources. There's going to be 3 different links for Pearson. There's going to be one for the textbook, one for mastering engineering, that's where the homeworks are, and one for the study. There's like a study environment that they have. So you have access to all of those. All right, cool. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, let's talk about polar bears. So I've introduced myself. It only seems fair that you guys need to introduce yourselves to me. So we're going to take 10 minutes. You're going to take your name card, and I would like you to decorate it. I would like you to specifically have a rad design and a catchphrase, whatever you're feeling. It's fine. And then after 10 minutes, we'll just one by one all stand up, not at the same time, individually, and you're going to present your name card. Tell us about yourself and this, what's your name and your catchphrase, and then the other questions I already put on those cards, right? So what's your major and why do you want to be an engineer? All right, so take 10 minutes, And let's roll. Also, it seems like a good time to tell you guys that anybody with the same first name, I have a very strict policy that only one person is allowed to have a first name at a time. And so we will be having fights to the death after class in the parking lot. Sure. I think now is a good time to also say that if anybody, right, so I like to run this. This is something that I heard another professor do, and I like to use this strategy. If somebody walks in late, just start clapping and don't say anything. Okay, that's what we're gonna do. All right. So, you good? Oh, yeah. What's up? Yeah, that's a good one. Up. Job, everybody. Find your name, and then we're doing the thing that's on the slides. Yep. Like 5 more minutes, guys. Oh, time flies. I know. I know. It's Dr. D. All right. 2 more minutes. All right. Finish them up. 45 seconds, guys. Rush. Get done. I expect full color. You know, all. Yeah. All right. I expect. I mean, 10 minutes. I expect some really sophisticated artwork here. All right. Well, we'll find out. All right. Time's up. Let's roll. So how are we going to do this? That's a great question. Would anybody like to volunteer too? All right, go for it. Cool. Thank you. Who's next? Anybody? Well, we're just going to keep going on that row. Let's see. Go to you. No, that to the left. My left, Monzer's right. What's your catchphrase? Okay, no catchphrase. All right, we'll work on it. We got a few weeks. We can work on it. All right, Manuel.
So I'm an engineer major, and I want to be an engineer because I want to be helpful in society. And for my catchphrase, I thought the man, the myth, the magic.
All right. All right. Solid.
Again, I'm a mechanical engineer. I want to be engineering.
All right. Fair.
The catchphrase is a guru. Name the Coca-Cola.
Okay. You want me to make you a name tag with that says Coca-Cola on it? No? All right. All right. Cool. All right. Huh?
My catchphrase is what
Obviously. All right. Fantastic. And also good to know. All right. Okay. Let's go to the back row. Mhm. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Carson.
Grant, majoring in mechanical engineering. Reason I want to be a mechanical engineer is because I like to do hands-on work. I also like to do with my program. Problem. My catchphrase is never tell me the odds.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
Nickname my buddies call me Sasquatch because I'm bigger than all of them. But my shoe size is like 13, 14.
Thanks. Cool. Thanks, man. All right. Also make sure that you have them up in front so I can see your name throughout class in case I am feeling particularly cruel and want to call on you for any reason. Caleb, let's go.
Electrical engineering. I want to be an electrical engineer, so I want to fix complex systems. And my nickname is not a Dr. Caleb. My catchphrase is built by ChatGPT, wired to create, built.
Okay. I appreciate you providing the reference for ChatGPT. I don't think that ChatGPT gets enough credit for the work that it actually does. All right.
Electrical. The reason I want to be an engineer is because when I was in the Air Force, the field service engineers got to work in the air conditioner and they made a lot more money than me.
Mhm.
Working on the stuff.
All right.
My catchphrase is, it wasn't me. And the only nickname that I have that anybody else calls me is Dad.
All right. All right. David.
David. I'm an electrical engineer. Why I wanted to be an engineer is because I want to go like third world countries and provide like free energy, but a lot of stuff that take for that. This is like the first. My catchphrase is specific to like a test day is you have a pencil because I probably won't on a test day.
Okay.
And my nickname, my friends call me Dave for some reason, and I guess it's so.
All right. It's weird that they would call you Dave.
Yeah. It's pretty short. I don't know.
All right.
My name's Colin W. I'm a mechanical engineer. I wanted to be an engineer because I'm good at math and I saw that there was high paying jobs.
Sure. Yeah.
Catchphrase is we'll have a number 4 with a side of fries and a bag of Coke.
Okay.
And my
Cool.
nickname is just Colin right now.
All right.
Work in progress.
All right. Cool.
Tyler, I'm an aerospace engineer. My catchphrase is go big or go home. I don't really have a nickname. When I played sports when I was younger, they called me by my last name. And the reason I want to be an engineer is I'm fascinated with space and pretty much anything that flies. So, planes, stuff like that.
Cool. All right. Awesome.
My name is Dawson. I came from engineer. I want to build cool cars, so I'm here. My catchphrase is bada bing, bada boom. Instead of
Classic.
my nickname is DJ.
Writing that one down for sure. Okay. I'm sure that's spelled correctly.
Also less fortunate. My catchphrase is one for trusty, second for the ring, and nickname is Cat. From my ability.
Okay.
My name's Kenton, or people call me Kento. I'm studying biomedical engineering. I want to be an engineer because I really like math and science, kind of like magic. My catchphrase, oh yeah.
All right. Also a classic. Okay. Madison. Sound very enthused by the nickname. You sound very enthusiastic about that nickname. Okay, cool. All right. Do you have a nickname? No? All right, we'll work on that. Jan.
I didn't. Why do I want to be an engineer? Well, I'm from the island of Maui. I'm also a family member to the island of fire. I want to just want to give back to people back to when we build affordable housing, so you don't have to come up with the mainland. And my catchphrase is, I'll teach you guys the language back at home called pigeon. That's called it. If no cat, or if you can, cat. If no cat, no cat. Means like you can do it, do it. Can't do it, then don't do it. Another one is, oh, we go raffle. We go do crazy things.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Oh, and then my name is J-Boy.
J-Boy. All right.
Engineering in general engineering, because physics, math, and I like money.
Mhm.
I don't really have a catchphrase or anything, so
Okay. Cool. Well, we got some work to do then, for sure.
My name is Jonathan, nickname Joe Nathan, but call me that because I will not notice it, no one actually calls me that.
It's happening now.
everything's awesome. Like, major mechanical engineering, because I love math and if there's something else math and sciences, I wasn't like.
I'm graduate, I do mechanical engineering. I want to be an engineer because I do like to problem solve and I think it's a challenging career. And catchphrase is, it is what it is, because it helped me not get mad in life moving my way.
Mhm.
And then nickname is just Isaac. I'm open to it.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
My name is Baker, my major is ESG. I'll be the engineer for the part of the student.
All right.
James Alexander, go by Alex.
All right.
Mechanical engineer, I want to be one because I like working. My catchphrase is life is fast, my car's faster, and then parentheses, I think it's pretty slow. And then, I have to put in advance, like an inside joke with my friends that John had, we were wondering who did the math have. This is the name of John Allen. That was another one.
All right. Nice. Love it. Classic. You.
Doing it. My catchphrase is send it.
Okay.
But I'm like one year major, one day in engineering because I'm doing nothing for it. My catchphrase is that's not a rule.
Okay. All right.
My catchphrase is I'm that guy, and my nickname is J.R.
JR.
Catchphrase is it's right. My major is mechanical engineering, and I was studying curriculum. My parents are engineering, so I had to do easier, I thought,
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. So, here's mine. It's upside down like that on top because that's when you fold it, it goes the right way. Looks like this in real life. I'm Dr. D. My catchphrase is failure to prepare is preparing to fail. My nickname is the Harvester of Sorrows. I majored in mechanical engineering, and why I wanted to be assistant dean was to help GCU become a world-class engineering school. That is why I wanted to become assistant dean. Why did I want to become an engineer? I was told in high school that I was good at math and science, and that's what people who are good at math and science do. And it's easier to get out of being an engineer than it is to get into being an engineer. And it turned out that once I started, it was really something awesome that I really enjoyed doing. But there you have it, right? And I have my cool 90s backgrounds on there because they're cool. That's why. Anyway, it says rad, right? So anyway, okay, great. This is gonna be fun, guys. This is gonna be fun. He said, and no one believed. All right, enough to break the ice. There you go. All right. I've done that activity a lot of different ways over the years. With a group this big, this is the best way, in my opinion. But I have done it where I have people sitting at groups of 4, and I have one person in the group introduce the other person. So you have to know about, like, you actually have to talk to the other person and know like how they're going to answer the question. But anyway, let's talk about. All right, here we go. So every class, I will remind you about all things, not all of the things, a lot of things that are due. This brings us up to quiz 1, basically. So homework 1 is due this Thursday. Homework 2 is due next week on Thursday. Our water tower product plan, we will talk about more towards the end of the week, right? Not today, but that's due a week from Sunday. We have our first quiz on the 22nd, and homework 3 that one is due on a Sunday because it doesn't affect quiz 1, and I would rather you guys be prepared for quiz 1 than worrying about homework 3. So you have a little extra time on that one, okay? Other than that, you'll notice that I name my quizzes. I will also have story time right before the quizzes. You will get a full class period to do the quiz. You're like, story time, what the heck did I sign up for? It's fine, guys. It's gonna be fine. Don't worry about it. Each of the quizzes fits into a very intricate story. Sometimes it's Doctor Who fan fiction. Sometimes it's Norse mythology themed. It's whatever I'm feeling, really. But we'll get there. When you see it, you're going to see a huge block of text. Not all of it is applicable to the problem that you're doing, but the parts that are in bold, for those of you who don't appreciate good literature, will be the parts that are the actual problem. So you don't have to feel like you're going to have to read the whole thing. You can just read the bold part and figure out what you're supposed to do from that. And that is a tip that I got from some other students who were very upset that they felt like they didn't have enough time to do quizzes in the past. So stand on the shoulders of giants, what I say. Anyway, cool. So expect a slide like this every class, right? Expect a Dr. D-ism every class. But for now, let's go over our topic objectives, right? So topic 1 is fundamental concepts of mechanics. So we're going to define mechanics as it applies to engineering. We're going to discuss the application of engineering mechanics. We're going to perform unit conversions by the end of this topic. If you can't do this now, oh, you will. You will be able to do it by the end of this topic. Apply vector operations to force vectors, specifically force vectors, even though it doesn't really matter if they're force vectors or just any kind of vector. And compare and contrast vectors and scalars. Okay. So what is mechanics? Does anybody have any idea of what mechanics is? When we say mechanics, what are we talking about? Ken?
Bodies that are subjugated to the actions of fluids.
That's pretty good. Did you just come up with that off the top of your head? Yeah, what he said, right? Is the study of bodies under the actions of forces. We'll shorten that a little bit, right? So a force and a body can vary in size, right? So there's an infinite combination of forces and bodies that we can talk about in mechanics, okay? So here are the categories that we have for mechanics. We've got rigid body mechanics. We've got statics, which is bodies at rest. So, all right. So we all know, right? Maybe we don't, but in statics, we talk about Newton's law, where the sum of the forces is equal to 0, right? And there's only really 2 conditions where that applies, right? Either the mass is 0 or the acceleration is 0. And if the mass is 0, I would argue that that is not a very interesting problem, because when the mass is 0, there's nothing there, right? When the acceleration is 0, that just means that the velocity is constant. It doesn't mean that it's not moving, right? It means that the constant velocity. So we can do statics problems for something that's moving as long as the velocity of that thing is constant, okay? Dynamics is what happens when we say, well, it's not equal to 0 anymore. It's equal to the mass times the acceleration. So we need to figure out how that force imbalance creates motion, right? Or acceleration specifically. Deformable bodies, right? We have mechanics of deformable bodies. We call this structural mechanics, right? So what happens when I take everything that I learned from statics and material science and I put them together? Well, I get another class. It's called structures of, I think we call it structures of materials. We might call it structural mechanics. We might call it mechanics of materials. I don't remember it's MEE 352 if you're a mechanical engineer. The biomeds do it in BME 352, which is bio materials, right? Yeah. And so you'll see electrical engineers, you guys will see it when you get into STG 242. I believe, which is your materials class. So there's stuff that you will see that builds later, right? And then there's fluid mechanics, which is really only a problem for mechanical and biomedical engineers. Electricals, you won't take any fluids classes. So, yay, I guess, yay for electricals. Electricals get to learn how to do lots of different black magic, though, with imaginary numbers and things like that. All right, mechanics is an applied science, okay? So it's closely related to physics, but physicists would get really mad if they heard that, okay? Same thing with mathematicians, right? Engineering uses math, but maybe not, maybe the same way that a painter uses a screwdriver to take the lid off of a can of paint. You can do it, but that's not what a screwdriver is designed for, okay? Now that's a horrible analogy because we're not breaking the laws of mathematics, right? But the point is that math and science are tools in our tool that if we were pure scientists or pure mathematicians, we would be very upset that they are getting used that way. Solutions get truncated, right? Assumptions get made that make the problem easier. And then the physicists are like, well, you didn't take into account the many worlds theory or how this is affecting the quantum mechanics. And maybe if you're an electrical engineer, you're going to have to start caring about that with quantum computing, right? Or computer engineer. But as a mechanical engineer, Newton's laws work most of the time for the stuff that we're doing, right? Same for biomedical. So the whole point is that mechanics uses these things as a foundation, but it's as it is applied to the real world, okay? All right. So, that's fairly comprehensive list. It is the foundation for many engineering topics and is an indispensable prerequisite to their study. And now it turned red and it'll get bold, right? Great. Theatrics. It's important, right? But really, what I told you guys before is it's really, really more in this class about understanding the vectors, right? Because why? Because statics, in and of itself, without context from a larger problem, it's just us solving math problems, right? Okay, I want to look at this beam and I want to know what the reaction forces are on that beam. That's great. That's great that you know that. But how does that affect your design? It doesn't in this class. It doesn't until you can understand material properties. Then that combined with statics gives you something much more useful, right? And so statics is a foundation, but there's going to be fairly low context in terms of what do we do with these results when we are done. Does that make sense? Okay. I will try as hard as I can to contextualize them in various contexts because we have electrical, biomedical, mechanical, general, computer, right? We've got a little bit of everything in here, so I'll try my best to kind of give you like where this is leading and where you would see this later on, okay? But it's always important to keep that big picture in mind, right? Which is also one of the reasons why I want you guys to really think about, right, why you want to be an engineer. Because there's no wrong answer to that. But at some point, you're likely going to have to reconcile whether you feel that the amount of work that you have to put in to be an engineer is worth your why, right? So think about that, right? Is the reason that I'm doing this good enough for me to continue doing it? And that's a question you should ask about anything, not just your studies, right? Anyway, here's a graphic of the different branches of mechanics. We talked about this, right? Rigid bodies are statics and dynamics. Deformable bodies, that's our materials and our structural mechanics classes. And then fluids is what happens when you have a bunch of particles that are just not constrained to move together, and you want to figure out how they're moving. So good luck with that. All right, before we get into units, any questions? Anybody? You guys all right? Comments, concerns, anything? No? No? All right. Okay. Units. I think Professor Tomford has a song about the units, right? Check your units. If you don't know Professor Tomford, then that's really that doesn't give you any help, right? And now I just sang that song. That's great. It's on the internet now. All right, units of measurement, right? Why do we need units of measurement? Because if I tell you that the answer is 7, that is meaningless. 7 what? Feet, Newton, pound, right? Grams per centimeter cubed. I don't know, right? So there are 4 fundamental physical quantities or dimensions that you need, well, really 3 that you need to build a system of units, right? If you have 3 quantities, you can build a system of units. And you can build, they can be arbitrary, right? I can make my own system of units as long as I have 3, and then I can derive all the other units from that, right? So we've got length, mass, and time, and force. For the SI system, for the International System of Units, force is the derived unit. So how do we relate this together, right? That's Newton's second law. Force is equal to mass times acceleration, right? So these are our 4 quantities, right, where 1 is derived. We say that length, mass, and time are our base units, right? And so if you look at force, force is a Newton in SI, right? But that's a kilogram meter per second squared, right? Kilogram, meter, second. Those are the base units, and we derived force from that, and we gave it a special name, okay? Great. I already said this, units are arbitrary names that we give to physical quantities. Somebody, Isaac Newton was the first one to really figure this out, so he got the privilege of naming it a force or whatever. He could have called it whatever he wanted, and he wasted his opportunity. That's fine. Do you guys realize that Isaac Newton is the biggest reason for all of your problems in this room right now? He invented calculus. He invented physics, right? Like that guy, real jerk. Yeah. There's no way that we can prove any of this stuff. Anyway, all right, we're going to work with 2 unit systems in this class. It's either English or US customary, however you want to call it, or or SI, right? Now, here's the thing. Well, let's talk about more about it, right? So SI units, basic units. We talked about this, length, time, and mass. Those are our base units in SI, where force is our derived unit, right? However, the US customary units, the basic units, are length, time, and force, which means that our derived unit is mass. And this is why we have slug. And also why this system of units is gross. Okay? Because slugs are gross. Now you're going to be like, okay, well, that's a lot of hatred for English units, right? And look, maybe you're right. Maybe I need change. But I think we can all agree that unit conversion within the SI units with the prefixes is much easier than needing to worry about how many BTUs or slugs or whatever these arbitrary units are. But they're still important. Why? Because most of you, I would guess, if I asked you what the temperature is outside, you would tell me in Fahrenheit, not in Celsius, which is not a problem, right? But that's fine. You would probably also, if I asked you what's the distance from that wall to that wall, how many of you are going to actually tell me in meters? In your brain, you think in feet, right? None of you are definitely, nobody's telling me in miles. That's for sure. That'd be weird. But you could, right? So 3 of the kinetic units referred to as base units may be defined arbitrarily. Again, so we can make our own system of units, but that would be really confusing because nobody else is using it. And then why are you doing that? Right. So what's the whole, right? So this is in your book, table 1.1 will give you the systems of units. There is in the course, the class resources tab, there is a link to the FE equation handbook, right? So it stands for the Fundamentals of Engineering exam. That will take you to the NCEES website, which I forget, I think that's the National Commission for Engineering Examinations, I believe is what that stands for. You would need to, in order to log in, you need to make an account. Then you can download that for free. It has a whole static section. It also has a whole unit conversion section that has all of them. There's also this other tool called Google that will give you unit conversions if you type in pounds to newtons, right? But your textbook has tables for this as well, okay? You have options. I recommend doing the FE one just because it is a PDF and it's searchable, right? So you can quick control F it and find what you need, okay? So again, this is just a table highlighting everything that we just said, right? Here's our base units, here's our derived unit, here's our base units, here's our derived unit, okay? This also brings in to, should also bring to our attention the pounds mass, pounds force thing, right? Like, so if I tell you that a car weighs 5,000 pounds, what should you assume? Well, my brain tells me I should assume that's a force because if it was 5,000 pound mass, that car is really big, okay? You would need to multiply that number by 32.2, and that would be roughly a 15,000 pound car. 150,000, sorry, right? That's a lot. That's more than what it should be, right? So use context of what the item is in most cases. But the big key is if you just see pounds without an M, it is a force always in this textbook. Okay? They will specifically denote when it is pounds mass. The only time that it really matters is if you're doing calculations off-world, which we won't. We will not be using, and we won't be doing any statics on Mars or Jupiter, Saturn. Right? We're going to stay strictly with Earth for this class. Okay, so here's another one, right? This is table 1.2. It has some common conversion factors, right? So, you know, a slug is 14.59 kilograms. A pound is 4.448 newtons. So here's the thing. I will always remember the pound to Newton conversion. My very first paper that I ever got published, one of the reviewers sent back, because I had chosen to use English instead of metric units for our calculations, which is fine because right? Because it's the same thing, right? I used the appropriate units, it was fine. But the guy comes back and said, you reported everything in English, you need to be using metric here, and then also gave me the conversion factor. Like I'm some kind of idiot and I can't go find it myself. It's very, very, I was actually offended by it. I'm sorry, it's just how it is, sorry. Anyway, side note, done. So here's some things, right? So, all right, how do we convert 47 pounds into SI units, right? So if I want you to convert that into Newton, how do you do it? All right, so what is it? What is 47 pound in Newton? $210. Does that sound good? Everybody getting that? That's actually 209.06, but it's fine. Okay. That's a great question. So it depends on the context, right? In this one, yes, you would do 2 sig figs, right? Because you were given 47, which is 2 sig figs. Okay. For the most part in the homework, so let's talk about sig figs. In your homework, if you get the wrong answer and you're like, I've crunched this number 500 times, I don't understand. Check that you're using the number of sig figs that they reported in, right? Honestly, with sig figs, make sure that you're carrying all decimal points till the very end and then do your rounding, right? But yeah, good point. All right. So notes on units first, no plurals, right? A kilogram. If I have 5 kilograms, it's 5 kg, right? not kgs. That would mean that I have kilogram seconds, which is not a unit that I am aware of at this point in time, unless you've made your own unit system, which I advise against, because if you want to use your own unit system, you have to create you have to give me the cheat sheet for it. Otherwise, I can't grade it, right? I'm just going to use the normal ones. We separate units with a dot, right? Meter dot second is a meter second. You will not see me use the dot. I will just write ms for meter second. I don't separate them with a dot, right? But in the textbook, if you see a dot, that is what it is indicating. You can also multiply two units together. So centimeter dot centimeter is centimeter squared, right? That's totally fine. Compound prefixes should not be, we'll never have a mega kilogram. That is not a thing. You just say a gigagram, which is a lot. I don't know that you would ever use a gigagram, but you could say that, I guess. You know, you could, anyway. Also, like no nano picofarads, right? Like, yes, that's very small, but yeah. Table 1.3 in your textbook shows you some of the prefixes here. Right. Ooh, oh. Okay. Typically, we like to report things in this range most of the time, like a kilogram or a centimeter or a millimeter, right? Like, or just like a regular meter, right? Like, those are typically where we like to report things. Some things make sense for certain things, some don't, right? And a lot of it has to do with what you're carrying around, right? And so, I'm not saying that you need to know every single appropriate units that convention that they have, right? But there's certain ones that we use all the time, like density in SI is typically kilogram per cubic meter, right? That's what we would use. Cubic centimeter if it's something that's a little bit smaller. We almost never see it in just cubic millimeters unless we're doing like a fluids problem, right? Something like that. It's all about the scale of whatever we're working on and what makes sense for the project, right? So if you have really small things like capacitors, right? You're going to use micro, nano, right? Pico, all of those. But if you have things like tensile stresses of steel, you're going to use giga, right? Because nobody has time to report hundreds of thousands or billions as the real number, right? As Sweet Brown would tell you, ain't nobody got time for that. Okay, great. That still plays, good. All right. So here's some real talk, right? So every year, thousands of engineering students around the world, really, are found lying in their homes in the fetal position in a puddle of their own tears because of a tragic error in the way units were reported, right? And I really don't want you guys to be one of those students. The bottom line is that I don't care whether you like to use English or SI. What I care about is that you are consistent throughout working the entire problem, right? Unit homogeneity, right? Why is that a big thing? Because I don't want to be watching the news 5 years from now when you all have really great jobs and I see GCU, former GCU student, GCU alumni, and your picture comes up, crash the Mars rover into Mars because they were using English units instead of metric, right? Which is what this link actually goes to, because in 1999, I believe, early 2000s, the folks at JPL were using one set of units, and the folks across the pond in Europe, who were also working on the project, used a different set of units, and nobody told each other. And then we crashed $1 billion piece of equipment into the surface of Mars where nobody can go fix it. Don't do that, right? Units are important, right? A much less, well, and there's also this stuff too, right? Maybe, yeah, there's also this. So if you don't understand units, your truck gets stuck under the bridge. Turns out that the posted clearance is actually important. Okay. So there you go. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's a testament to the civil engineers who developed the bridge, really. Bridge versus truck, who wins? All right, I think we get the point here. I don't think we need a full minute and 7 seconds. All right. Any questions on units thus far? Makes sense. Units are important, right? Units can help us. So I know Professor Higgins likes to say every problem is a units problem. And it's true. If you ever take the FE, if you ever take the PE test, if you know what the final units are, you can help backtrack what you are supposed to be doing, right? And so understanding units is really important. It's a really important skill. But we're going to talk about Dr. D's super terrific method for problem solving, for statics, which it turns out this applies to other things too, but we're in statics right now. So number one, first thing, read the question and understand what you're being asked, okay? Great. What method should we be using to solve this problem? What sort of things do I know? What don't I know, right? Knowns and unknowns, sort of thing. Number two, draw a picture. In statics, this is always going to be a free body diagram. We need to be drawing free body diagrams for every problem. Why? Well, when we get there, I'll show you something really interesting. But turns out that if you draw a good free body diagram, you have your entire Newton's law equation represented graphically for you right there. So you can say the sum of the forces, and you know exactly which forces are acting in which direction, okay? It is really helpful. It's really important. If you don't, you'll be sorry. And that's not supposed to sound foreboding. I attach a lot of points to you guys drawing free body diagrams on problems. Like when we get to quiz day, and on quizzes, I'll go over this too, but you will know exactly how much each problem is worth and how I'm going to separate the points out. Okay, you will see free body diagrams worth a lot of points. Why? Because the setup is super important. Statics, as it turns out, is a lot of bookkeeping. It is keeping track of the things that we know and what we don't know. Okay, and the free body diagram helps us to do that. Sometimes you have more than one FBD per problem. It depends on what the problem setup looks like, and we'll talk about that as we move forward, right? How detailed does it have to be? You guys are going to see that most of mine look like rectangles or squares of some kind. Doesn't have to be super detailed, but there are some rules to it, and we'll go over them later. Knowns and unknowns, right? What do you know? What don't you know? How many unknowns do you have? Turns out that the number of unknowns that you have are going to be synonymous with the number of equations that you have to solve simultaneously. I say simultaneously, but it's a system of equations, right? We are going to have to solve multiple equations for multiple unknowns. Then we're going to write down our equations, right? For statics, sum of the forces is equal to mass times acceleration is equal to 0, or sum of the moments is equal to I alpha, which is the moment of inertia times the angular acceleration, which is also equal to 0. We will try to break it into X and Y components, right? We're going to try to stick with Cartesian coordinates as much as possible in here. When you get to dynamics, that's going to change. You'll talk about cylindrical and spherical and all that other stuff. And sometimes it makes sense. You can do any problem with Cartesian coordinates. It's just how hard you want to work for it, right? Then when you're done with that, you solve your system of equations. And the very last step is check that your results make physical sense, right? Right. What's your gut feel, right? Like, do you think that it makes sense that this, let's use an example, right? Like if I have something hanging from the ceiling and it's statically there, like this projector, right? Let's say that weighs 20 pounds. Should my upward force back into the wall that is holding it in place be greater than 20 pounds? No, it should not, right? And so that's what I mean, right? Check your results, make sure you have a good feeling, right? Check the units. Sometimes this is where you'll see unit issues, right? Like, okay, I see that this is weird, right? Check, if you notice something weird, negative signs, right? Negative signs play a role in that. I don't want you guys to be overly concerned about that, right? My point of view on this is the answer is great, but the answer isn't the only thing. If you guys messed up like a negative sign here or there, that's not a ton of points. If you did the entire process of solving the problem right, except for a negative sign, I think you did a pretty good job, right? focus on the process of solving the problems. When you do quizzes, focus on writing down all of your work. If you don't write work down, I can't give you partial credit, right? If I can't figure out what, over communicate. We need to over communicate the things that we are doing, right? Okay. I will also, I'm not going to make this a rule, but I do think it makes it a lot easier if you do everything symbolically until the very end. Okay. Why? Well, let's say somebody decides to give you a problem and they prescribe, I don't know, 3 different force values, right? And then I say, okay, well, that was great. What happens if I change the force? If you subbed your numbers in at the very beginning, you have to do the whole thing over again. If you wait till the very end, you just have to do the last couple steps over again, right? It makes it, it simplifies things. And that might not be something that happens in class, but I will guarantee you that when you get out in the real world, your boss will be like, that looks really good. What happens if we change this one thing, right? And you're gonna be like, I should have listened to Dr. D. I should have done it symbolically. I should have written my MATLAB code to do this for me. Why didn't I do that? All right, we're going to talk about it again. So I want to address some things. I understand sometimes people have, we're going to call it quiz anxiety, because I was very strategic about not calling it an exam. It is a quiz. It makes it feel more approachable and less threatening. It's a quiz, it's not an exam. Okay, great. What if I panic? This is why we have these, I put these steps up here, right? And if you have a process of things that you are doing, you always have something to fall back on, right? I read this question, I'm feeling nervous, what do? Draw your free body diagram. Start there. Newton's laws, right? So when you're working on a problem, figure out what you're being asked. Write down your knowns and unknowns. You're going to need those to solve it later. Do your free body diagram, right? In statics, we're going to be using Newton's law. We're always going to have a free body diagram. If you ever take a dynamics class, there's a lot more ways to slice that. We have more tools to solve those problems, but we're not going to focus on that. We're just doing Newton's law problems, right? Draw your diagram. Always a free body diagram. Always, always. I wonder if we should draw free body diagrams. I don't know. All right. Write down your governing equations, Newton's second law. Solve your equations symbolically. Plug in your numbers and solve your equations for your unknown values. Check your units. If you do all these things, great success, guaranteed, right? Step through it. Create an algorithm for yourself, because if you get into a stressful situation, you don't want to have to think about it. You just want to do muscle memory, right? You don't have to, you can go on autopilot and just start writing stuff down. And eventually things will come together, okay? How do we get to the point where we're just doing these things automatically? Lots of practice, lots of problems, right? Oh, check the realism of the solution, which admittedly, I don't think we're going to be I'm not going to be super hard on that part of it here. I will bring it up when we do problems though. I'll be like, hey, should this make physical sense? And some of it, again, I told you, some of this is contextless, right? Maybe it makes sense if I'm making something out of steel. Maybe it doesn't if I only have, sheet metal aluminum, right? It really just depends. We talked a little bit about numerical accuracy, right? But the accuracy of a solution, this was the sig figs thing, right? We are only as accurate as the measurement tools that we have, right? And so the accuracy of a solution depends on the accuracy of our given data and the accuracy of the computations that are performed. And it cannot be more accurate than the least accurate of these two things, right? And so again, if you're told 47 pounds, you got to track your sig figs, right? That's the point. And it has to be the least number of sig figs. So in this case down here, right? If I was given 40.2 and 15.58, we're using 3 sig figs because I can't be more accurate than the least accurate part of my problem. Okay. So great. That's all this is saying. General rule for engineering problems: the data are seldom known within an accuracy of greater than 0.2%. I mean, that's pretty good. If you're off by 0.2%, I feel like you're doing pretty good. You're having a pretty good day. Heck, I would say that if you're within single digit percents, you're probably doing okay. But anyway. All right. Let's do some problems. Okay. So we're going to do some unit conversion problems first. So we've got two of them up here, right? First, we want to convert 2 kilogram per, or sorry, 2 kilometer per hour to meters per second. Okay. Great. Well, we need some conversion factors for that, right? And I am not going to sit here and tell you that you need to, is that not going to work? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you need to memorize conversion factors. That is the least thing that you need to do, right? If you need a unit conversion, it will either be provided to you or you will look it up, right? Your boss at your job when you get out of here is never going to be like, hey, if you don't tell me this unit conversion right now, you're fired. That's not how that works. And if it does happen, that's pretty bad boss. All right. So anyway, let's go. 2 kilometers per hour. All right, we can see that. And we want it in meters per second. This one's not too bad, right? Kilometer to meter. All right. Kilometer per hour to meters per second, right? So how many kilometers do I have in a meter? Or how many meters in a kilometer? 1,000. Okay. So I've got 1,000 meters per kilometer, right? How many seconds in an hour? It's 3,600. And if you don't remember that, you can always piecewise it down. 60 minutes per hour, 60 seconds per minute. Yeah. No, I'd have to call public safety to do it. The thermostat doesn't work. What's up? Yeah, go ahead. So we'll do it out, right? Hours here. So I've got 1 hour per 60 minutes, right? And 1 minute per 60, not 6S. Yep, don't worry about it. I assure you it is not. Okay. Kilometers go away, hours go away, minutes go away. I'm left with meters and seconds, right? Fractions. Yeah, baby. Best. So if we do that and we do it just real quick, it's 0.556 meters per second. But we were only given a single sig fig. So right, first I'll write it down 0.556 meters per second. But truly 0.6 meters per second. Right? Great. Perfect. Easy peasy. How do we go from meters per second to feet per second? Well, that would require me to know how many feet are in a meter, right? So 0.6 meters per second. Typically, I would have 1 foot per 0.3048 meters. Left with feet per second, which is going to give me 1.8 roughly feet per second. But I only got 1 sig fig, so 2 feet per second. Great success. We did it. We converted those units. Okay. Now, gotta do this. All right. So any questions on this? If you notice the way that I do this, I don't ever bother with, oh, there's this multiplied by this. I know how many of one thing there is per something else, and I would change the, like, if we wanted this to be, if we had it in hours per kilometer, which would be ridiculous, but if this was the reciprocal, right? You would just flip that. You don't have to worry about, oh, there's 2.22 kilograms per pound, right? Does that make sense? Do the fractional math. I think it's a lot easier. If you want to just do the multiplying, that's fine, but you got to keep track of what you're getting rid of, right? It doesn't absolve you from tracking the numerator and the denominator. It just changes, instead of having 1/60th, I would have 60, right? If I wanted to go the other way. Does that make sense? Yes, no, yes, okay. All right. I would like you guys to take a few minutes. You can work together, but convert 300 pound seconds and 52 slug per cubic foot into the appropriate SI units. I'll leave those up there for you guys to see. Good. Cool. Fill out that stuff on there. All right. How you guys feeling? You want some more time? Raise your hand if you got it. Give you guys another minute. Keep working. One more minute. But there's no decimal. It's one. It's one sig fig. It's always there unless it's not. Yes. Yeah. It's a good one. Okay. Alrighty. Finish up what you guys got. Another few seconds. Everybody feeling good? They got something? Everybody's got something? I know we talked about sig figs and everything, and that's fine. But what I would really be more happy about is just that you got the conversion done for this particular problem, right? So we can tidy up sig figs later. Doing the actual conversion is the meat of of this particular exercise, right? Okay. All right. Everybody good? Anybody want some more time? No response. All right. Okay. Well then. Should probably do this. Ugh. All right. So, does this look like what you guys got? So the first one's pretty straightforward, right? We get 300 pound seconds. Seconds is great because seconds exists in all unit systems unless you're making one on your own and you decided to use hours or years as your unit of time, which I don't suggest, but that's cool. You can do that. So you got 1,000, you end up with 1,334.4 Newton seconds, right? Which, when you bring it down to one sig fig, is 1,000 Newton seconds or 1 kilonewton second, right? Okay. This next one had a little bit of a tricky trick in it that sometimes people get tripped up on, and that is what happens when you have an exponential in your unit, right? Meters cubed, right? The slug one's not too bad. That table had this conversion from slugs to kilograms right off, right? So it's not a big deal. The thing that's tricky is this part, right? So if I have cubic feet and I want to go to cubic meters, I actually have to cube the conversion factor. So think of it this way, right? If you wanted to do this longhand, right? Your units are actually 52 slug times 1 over feet times 1 over feet times 1 over feet. So you would need to apply meters over feet times meters over feet times meters over feet. That is why you need the cubic in there, right? What we end up with is 26,792.53 kilogram per cubic meter, which I then converted to megagrams because that's a lot of kilograms. It just shortens it up. And that's one of the reasons why the prefixes exist, right? Is to make the context of your sig figs reasonable. Because if you were to leave that as kilograms, you'd have 27,000 kilograms, which is not wrong, right? It's fine. But you can shorten it up by saying 27 megagrams, right? Per cubic meter. So if you're looking for what is right and what is wrong here, 27,000 kilogram per cubic meter or 27 megagram per cubic meter would be acceptable. Right? And you would get most of the points. Like I'm not going to take off a ton of points if you don't have the right sig figs. Yeah. Isaac. So,
Yeah. Like, it just want the answers in kilograms, but it's long. Don't convert it to kilograms.
No. Yep. If you're asked for a specific unit, keep it in that specific unit. One of the Dr. D-isms that will probably come up on one of the slides is answer the questions that I ask you before you answer the questions I didn't ask you. Okay. All right. Any questions on unit conversion so far? We're good? Everybody's good? You guys are like, why are you doing this to me? That's a big deal. Yeah. Yeah. If you forget the cube, that's I mean, you're gonna lose you're gonna lose points on that one. More than 1 point for sure. Yeah. All right. Okay. It says all about vectors. It's not really all about vectors. I mean, it is because we're gonna be talking about vectors, but it's not like everything about vectors coming up. That's like multiple lectures on that. All right. Anyway, no questions on units. We good? We good? Once, twice? No? Sold? All right. Let's get into some vector stuff. Now, what you guys are going to notice is that you've probably done a bunch of this in ESG-162 and in Physics 1, right? There's going to be a lot of trig. There's going to be trig heavy coming up. We're going to have to do trig and geometry, right? There's a lot of that's going to happen. But let's talk about the application of vector addition, right? So if I have 3 concurrent forces here, right? So notice, and this isn't really, right? We've got F1 going along this chain, F2 going along that one, and F3 going along here. We can add all of these together into what we call a resultant force, right? Which is this F sub R vector right here. It's just representing that we've added all of these, and we can represent all 3 of those forces by a single force that kind of the direction of it gets skewed by the direction of all of these, right? Okay. You can also see here that they've done, here's F1 plus F2, right? Yeah, you kind of see where F3 gets added to the mix over there. All right. So we need to decide if the hook will fail, bend, or break, right? That's what the context of this is, right? I'm pulling on this. I'm going to say that I've got 3 horses attached to each of these chains, and we are pulling something with it, which is probably not a great idea. Probably just need 1 chain, but okay. Maybe, 2 of the horses are pretty old. 1 is really doing most of the work, right? That's probably what's happening. Anyway, to do this, we need to know what the resultant is, right? You want to know what is the full amount of force that that hook is seeing. You don't necessarily care that parts of it are going in different directions. You want to know what's the net result, right? How much is going, what is the net effect of me pulling on this hook with these three forces, okay? And again, we're not going to get into whether or not it's going to bend or break, but that all depends on what material the hook's made out of, right? I don't know, if it is 3D printed, it's probably not going to last as long as if it is made out of steel, which I don't think that if you're making a tow hitch for your car, you should 3D print it. It's probably not a great idea. Definitely not ABS. Maybe the Mark Forge that has the carbon fiber inlay, maybe. All right, anyway, scalars and vectors. Okay, what's the difference? Does anybody know the difference between a scalar and a vector? Yep. Yep, exactly. Scalar is just that. It's just a number, right? And a vector has a direction that is associated with it. So one of the easiest ones is speed, right? How fast are you going? Well, I'm going 50 miles per hour. Okay, great. That doesn't tell you if you're going forward or in reverse, just tells you how fast you're going. Velocity is a vector. Velocity will tell you I'm going 50 miles per hour north on I-17, right? There is a direction associated with it. So things that are scalars, mass, right? Your mass doesn't have a direction, it just is. You can be in space where there is very little to no gravity, and you would still have the same mass, right? Your force due to that mass, or as we call it in the business, your weight, depends on the gravity or the acceleration vector, right? And it is in the same direction as that vector. And it is a vector, right? My weight is pointing down towards the earth, right? Velocity, we just talked about that, right? So how do you add scalars? You just add them. They're just numbers, right? How do you add vectors? Well, there's a couple of different ways. They say the parallelogram law. You can also use the triangle law, which is the same. Really, it's the same as the parallelogram law. It's just that you make a triangle instead of a parallelogram. We'll talk about it in a second. You'll see special notation for vectors, right? This book is going to do it a little bit different than how I like to display vectors. I'm going to show you both because it's good to know both. In this textbook, when you're reading the textbook, anything that is a vector will be bold, and anything that is a scalar will not be bold, which I think is not great notation because I think it's very easy to misconstrue those. When I draw it, a vector will have an arrow over the top of it, and a magnitude will be inside the absolute value signs to denote that that is just a magnitude, okay? You guys can feel free to do it however you want, but it's really hard to write out on exams in bold, right? Just a fact. Unless you want to bring multiple pens, which maybe you do. All right. Scalar multiplication and division. Okay. So these are all vectors. They all have different lengths, right? This one has length A. This one has length 2A. It is presumably twice the length of A. Although to me, that doesn't seem to jive exactly, but you know, it's a figure from the textbook. So Hibbler gets paid a lot more than I do, so that's fine. Negative A, look, it's like A, but in the opposite direction. Bizarro A. Negative 0.5A. Again, I would argue whether or not this is actually half the size of either A or negative A. But if it's not drawn to scale, it's fine, right? So negative sign denotes which way the head's going, right? None of this makes any sense though, right? Because there's no coordinate system. So what does positive and negative actually mean here? It means one is the opposite of the other. When we do problems, we're going to need to assign coordinates, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay. So how do we add them? You guys might have remembered from physics the tip to tail addition method for vectors, right? Which is formally known as the parallelogram or sorry, the triangle method, which if I'm going to do a graphical method, I prefer the triangle method. Why? Because it makes a triangle. Well, you take vector A, you draw vector B at the end of it, and then you draw a vector connecting the two, and hey, you've got the resultant. The parallelogram method is very similar. What you would do is you would take A and B, and then you would draw this vector from the end of A to P, and you draw this vector from the end of A, or end of B to P. Look at that. That looks like vector A, and this one looks like vector B. Oh, and then it's just the triangle method, except it has extra steps, right? That's all that it is. Great. How do we do something like this? That's not a right triangle. That's a pain in the butt. So we're going to have to dig deep for law of sines, law of cosines stuff, and we'll talk about that in a minute, right? But, when we have right triangles, that makes it a lot easier. And you could say, well, Doctor, I could just make this right triangle there and have two right. You could totally do that. That'd be great. We'll talk about that too, right? But yeah, so you can always do these graphically. And if you draw them to scale, the nice thing is that you can just use a protractor to get the actual angle from them, right? So you don't even have to do any geometry, right? But you would have to draw them to scale. And that's can be kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. Okay. The resolution of a vector, when we say we're going to resolve a vector, so some vocab, that's just saying we have a resultant and we're going to break it down into its components. So, all right, I have F and I want to break it down into the components along U and V. I'm going to resolve that into U and V components. We do this a lot when we have a resultant, or we have, we'll call it a resultant. We have a force vector or a position or whatever vector we have, and we break it down into X and Y components, right? That's resolving it into its X and Y components. So you'll hear me either say we're going to resolve the vector or we're going to break it down into its components, synonymous. The textbook will probably ask you to resolve stuff. That's what they mean. Don't miss it. Okay. I think this is pretty straightforward, right? Again, not a right triangle here. So we got to pull out law of sines, law of cosines if we want to solve specific things about it. What kind of problems would we have to solve? Okay. Well, say I know that this is a 500 Newton force, right? And I want to break it down. I want to know how much is in the U direction and how much is in the V direction. Well, I also need to know something about the angles, right? Law of sines and law of cosines predicates that I have a little bit more information than what is given here, right? And so something like this, you would need to know, okay, off of horizontal, you know that this is horizontal, right? You would probably know what this angle is because you designed this, right? And so interior angles, all that stuff. This is where the geometry comes into play, right? How much geometry am I expecting you guys know? I'm expecting you to know that there's 360 degrees in a circle or around all four quadrants, right? If I start someplace and I turn 360 degrees, I get back there. If I go 90 degrees, there's 90 degrees between X and Y, right? That's important. I'm not expecting you guys to do proofs of geometry at all. It's not what this class is about. But I'm going to expect, basic understanding of how do we find angles, right? Like, and you'll see when we get into some more of this stuff. What if I have a system of coplanar forces? Man, that's loaded. All right. What is it? What do we mean by coplanar? We mean that the forces exist in the same plane. Okay. So they're not three-dimensional in this case, they are 2D, right? It's only one plane. A bunch of forces exist in one plane. They're coplanar. Great. So I'm going to resolve this into X and Y components. We talked about that. All right, so if I'm going to report a vector, what do I need to report? I need to report to you a magnitude and a direction, right? There's a couple of different ways we can do that. I can say, well, I'm going to go 5 meters northwest. Right? Great. That's helpful, right? Or I can tell you, I need you to travel 600 yards, 30 degrees from the horizontal, right? That's also helpful. So you need to either know, you need to know the magnitude and the direction. You were either given a direction like a cardinal direction, or you'll be given an angle, right? Okay, so if I know this angle, right, that's pretty simple, right? We should be able to resolve that. How would you resolve that if you knew the angle from the horizontal right here? We'll call it theta, right? What would you do? I know that, say you know this. Looks like it's No, I'll call that 30 degrees. Let's just say it's 30 degrees for right now. How would you do it? How would you find the x component of that vector? Yep, f, the magnitude of f times the cosine of theta, right? And then this would be the sine component, right? We'll talk about unit vectors more in a second, right? But what we've got here, right? We've got our I and j unit vectors. Notice this is our coordinate axis, right? The coordinates are really important. And we're always going to use right-hand rule coordinates whenever we are doing our calculations, right? The unit vectors are very special vectors that have a length of 1 unit in the direction of a coordinate axis, okay? So we use I for x, j for y, and k for z, okay? So if I write out a vector, there's 2 ways I can write out a vector, right? I told you I can give you the magnitude and the angle, or I can say it's 5 in the I minus 6 in the j plus 10 in the k, right? And it's giving you a coordinate system roadmap of how to get from point A to wherever that vector is pointing, okay? Think about Cartesian form, as we call it, as a step-by-step direction if you're starting at the origin and trying to get to where that vector is pointing, okay? And this is where the bookkeeping comes in, right? All right, so in this case again, for example, f is equal to fx in the I plus fy in the j, right? You'll notice that they use the blue for the unit vectors. I put a little hat over I and j because they're very formal and they like to wear hats. You can also see here that if I were to tilt this, I can draw x and y in whatever direction I want, right? Positive can be whatever direction I want. I can tilt this. X is now along fx. They call it prime to indicate that it's different than the other picture. Okay? But in this case, look, it's the same formulation, right? F prime here is equal to fx prime in the I direction minus fy prime in the j, because it's pointing downward now. Okay? In this case, fx and fy, those are the magnitudes, and I and j are the vectors that give you the directionality. That makes sense. Okay. Okay. A note on coordinate system. Doesn't matter what coordinate system you choose. Doesn't matter. Yeah, sure. Nope, but some choices are better than others, right? What makes a choice better than another choice? Well, whichever way reduces the amount of trig that I have to do to solve the problem. That is what makes one choice better than the other. Reducing the amount of work that I have to do. We will get into some choices later where we start talking about moments, where the Dr. D rule for taking the moment of something is to pick the point where the most forces pass through, because that means more of your moments are 0, and then you have to do less math. Because if you have to do less work, chances are you have less things that you can mess up. Okay, that's the rule. But again, some choices are better than others, right? So in this example here, right, you can do this coordinate system for anything, right? But it doesn't really make sense here because you have to do a lot of trig. I can just tilt this, right? And now it just becomes a right angle problem again, instead of me having to worry about what's that extended angle that I have to work through. Okay, if you don't choose a coordinate system, that's going to be a problem because the coordinate system will be chosen for you, and it might not be the one that you actually use to solve your problem. So this is me saying, when you do a problem, make sure that you draw your coordinate system that you used to do it, because if you don't, and I used a different one, you and I will have different answers. And that will indicate on a quiz that it is wrong. But if you choose a coordinate system that's different than mine and you inform me to it, I will solve your problem with the coordinate system that you chose. And then we're on the same page, right? So again, over communicate your assumptions. And just like the rock says, it doesn't matter what coordinate system you choose. And some of you probably don't get it, and that's fine. It's fine. All right. Good. We're doing good on time. All right. So if we're going to add several vectors together, what should we do? There's a couple of ways that we can do this. Like I said, we can do the tip to tail, like we can do triangle or parallelogram. I think that when you have more than two vectors, that is not a great way to do it. The other thing you can do is you can break all of your vectors into x and y components. Then you add all the x components together, all the y components together. If it's three-dimensional, you add all the z components together, right? And then that's your resultant because you're just adding those things together. So step one, to resolve each into its components. Step two is add all of your components that are alike together. Your x's get added together. So another way of saying it is your i's get added together, your j's get added together, and your k's get added together, okay? Then you find the magnitude and the angle. We'll talk about that too. How do we do that? How do you find the magnitude of a vector? If I'm given fxi plus fyj plus fzk, how would you find the magnitude of that vector? How would you find how big it is? Let's just do it in x and y. Right? If I have fx in the I plus fy in the j, that's my vector. How do I find out how big that resultant is? Sorry, say it one more time. Yeah, square root of the sum of the squares. Some people refer to that as the Pythagorean theorem, which is also the square root of the sum of the squares. What if I do that in 3 dimensions? How am I supposed to do that? Well, it's the square root of the sum of the squares. You just add the z component in there too. So if you want the magnitude of something, there's a special name for it in 3 dimensions. It's called a norm. So if you hear somebody ask you for the norm, which I'm not going to do, I'll just ask you for the magnitude, but just for your awareness, the norm of a thing is how big is it, then the magnitude. How do you find the angle? Well, presumably, if you have the magnitude and you have the x and y and z components, you can do some trig to figure out what that angle is, right? So probably inverse tangent for two dimensions. The inverse trig function will be your friend. If you're doing inverse trig functions, this is so public service announcement, make sure that if you're using degrees, your calculator is in degrees. And if you're using radians, that your calculator is in radians. If you're doing it in MATLAB, use sine D, cos D, tan D. Those are the commands. Or arc sine, arc cos, arc tan with a D at the end. That indicates to MATLAB that you're putting in degrees instead of radians. That's all that it's doing. But, there we are. You can also represent it with magnitude and direction, right? We just went over this, right? So if it's 2D, 2D is pretty simple. We'll talk about 3D next class. This is where you want your bookkeeping to be good for 3D. 2D, I think, is pretty intuitive, right? You're probably pretty used to that. Okay, let's try one. We'll do this thing together. So I've got these two forces acting on a bolt. We're not told how we're producing these forces. We just know that they're there. Maybe I'm trying to pull that bolt out with a hammer because, I don't know. I've got 2 hammers and I'm trying to pull this bolt out for reasons. Why don't you just unscrew it? That would have been a better idea, but here we are. Okay, so I've got 2 forces, Q and P. Q is 60 newtons and and P is 40 newtons. And we want to determine the resultant of these 2 forces. Now we can do this a couple of ways, right? We can do triangle method. We can do parallelogram method. I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it with trig. Why? Because I think it's easier to do it with trig. That's why, if we're going to be honest. So what are we looking at here in particular? Oh, perfect. First things first. You know what? We'll keep it here for right now. Get my pen up. Great. So if we're going to do the trig approach, right, there's a couple of things that we need to do. First, we need to break down our Q and P into X and Y components, right? That's what it said. We need to resolve all of our vectors into X and Y components. Luckily, we have all of these these things here, right? But no coordinate system was provided. So I'm going to say this is my coordinate system. And that's great. And if that's not the coordinate system you used, sorry, that's fine too, but I'm going to do it this way. I think most people probably would pick this one if left to their own devices. You could also angle it if you wanted to along P or Q, but that doesn't really help make this any easier, right? Okay, so if I'm looking at this, right, let's start with Q. I'm going to redraw. Here's Q. What's this angle off of the horizontal? Yep, 45. So that's 45 degrees. And if I want QY and QX, how do I do it? All right, well, QX is going to equal the magnitude of Q, right, times the cosine of 45 degrees in the I direction. And that's a vector. Okay. So we can plug things in, right? 60 times the cosine of 45 degrees, which is going to give us 42.43 Newton. And that's the I direction. It's not. Let me do that again. In the I direction. Notice that's positive, right? And that's what we would expect, right? That vector is pointing up and to the right. And so we would expect that the X direction is going to be positive and the Y direction is going to be positive, right? So checking the viability of our solution. Turns out that QY is the same, right? If we use 45 degrees, the X and the Y component are going to be the same, right? Because 1 root 2. That's why, right? So we can skip the math on the second one because we know enough about trig to know that at 45 degrees, the sine and the cosine are equal. And so this is going to be 42.43 in the J newtons. Make sense? We tracking, we good? Yeah. We're going to do the same thing for P, right? I'll change colors. Oh, didn't want to do that. Let me go back here. Fine, we'll do it over here. X, Y. Here's P. You know what? And we'll change our color. PX and PY. And that angle is what, 20 degrees? Okay, so what do we do? Well, same thing that we just did, right? Magnitude of P times the cosine of 20 degrees. Right, so if I want P in the X, magnitude of P, cosine 20 degrees in the I. If I plug things in, that's going to be 40 times the cosine of 20 degrees I, or 37.6 in the I Newton. Do the same thing for PY. In this case, we can't just say that it's equal, right? Because 40 degrees are, because 20 degrees isn't going to give us that, right? So we actually have to crunch this one. So PY is going to be equal to 40 times the sine of 20 degrees in the J. And when we plug that in, we'll get 13.68 Newton in the J. This makes sense to me as well. The angle is flatter, so we should expect more force in the x direction than in the y direction, right? Think about punting a football with the same amount of force, or a soccer ball, maybe. If you kick a low kick, it might have more distance than a high kick at the same force, right? Okay. Well, that's great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these values and I'm going to move them. You guys can't do that, but I can, because computers, man. Maybe you can. Maybe you guys have fancy laptops that you're writing on. That's great. We truly live in amazing and unprecedented times. Okay, I'm going to delete this so that we can just keep going. So what do we do with this? Okay, great. We have our components. We're going to take our I components. We're going to add those together. We're going to take our J components. We're going to add those together. And we'll get a new vector that is the resultant of these two, right? And that one will be, apparently not. Apparently I need to use the mouse. That one is going to be purple because red and blue together is purple. Also GCU. So the resultant is going to be equal to QX plus PX in the I plus QY plus PY in the J. Okay. Great. And that's going to be in Newton because we're adding two things together that are Newton. Perfect. So what do we got? We've got 42.43 plus 37.6 right in the I. So in the interest of time, I will just write it out. 80.03 I plus 56.11 in the J. Right? Lovely. Great, but that's not a magnet. That's one way. If you were to leave it like that on a quiz, I would be perfectly happy. I would be so pleased. Unless you were asked for the magnitude and the angle, in which case we haven't answered the question yet. It didn't really say in what we set up, right? It just said find the resultant. Found the resultant. But just for completeness, let's do the whole thing out, right? So if I was going to finish this up, I understand that this resultant makes some, like if this is point A, right? Here's my resultant. This resultant has some angle that I'm going to call phi, right? Here's my x-axis. Here's my y-axis, okay? So we have this magnitude, right? And we know what the x and y components of it are, but we want to know what is r, right? And so I can rewrite r as its magnitude times, right? Its magnitude at some angle, right? At an angle of phi, okay? So how do I find the magnitude of this? We talked about that, right? That's Pythagorean theorem. So the magnitude of r is going to be equal to the square root of the x component and the y component, which I just took from right here, right? I is x, j is y. That's all that it is. Throw it in here. What do we end up with? Roughly 97.75 Newton. Am I tracking? Are people checking my math? You should be. Always check. Always check. My fingers are bigger than the buttons on the calculator, and so there are sometimes problems. Also, I would recommend, if you don't have a calculator, I definitely recommend getting one. Trying to do it on your watch is not, it's not ideal. Um, especially when there's trig functions involved. All right, and then to wrap it up, because I don't think we have enough time to do the one last problem that I have in here, but we'll start off next class with it, is how do I find this angle? How do I find that angle phi? Yep, inverse, tan inverse of what? Well, it's going to be the y over the x, right? Because what is tangent? Is the opposite over the adjacent, right? The opposite is the y direction, right? Here's my opposite side, and here's my adjacent side, okay? Opposite side is going to be the y, so that's 56.11 divided by 80.03. And if we put that in, I got 37 point, oh, sorry, not 37, 35. That would have been bad. 35.03 degrees. And so we can write this as R is equal to 97.75 Newton at an angle of 35.03 degrees. Notice that I drew the angle specifically like this, meaning from the horizontal upward, right? You would typically, it's shown this way, right? With the arrow. Why? Because I could have reported it from the y-axis. I could have reported it from the negative x-axis, right? I can report it from wherever I want, but the typical convention is from the positive x-axis. How far have you rotated? Right? That is the typical convention. Okay. Questions, comments, or concerns right now? Anybody? Is everybody feeling all right after day one? Because tomorrow is going to be, there's going to be more of it. If you need specific trig identities, I'll provide them. Because I honestly am not a proponent of telling you to memorize anything. When you get out of here, I can't express this enough. When you get out of here, nobody is going to ask you to memorize anything. All right? But they are going to expect you to know where to look for it. Okay? Answering somebody's question with I don't know is fine, but it should always be I don't know, but I know where to find it. Okay? Next class. Hold on one second, maybe. There we go. Oh, I got to log into this. Hold on. I'm going to ask you, so at the end of every class, I'm going to ask you guys to do a quick poll everywhere. Right at the end of every class, I'm going to ask you guys to do a quick poll everywhere. So give me 1 sec to log in. There we go. And that should go. Okay. There you go. Okay. The question is, what was most confusing about today's class? All right. Before you leave, put your name tags back on the table. I'll bring them back tomorrow and you guys can grab them again. Ivan, what's up? Oh, sorry. I have to unpause the. It's helpful. There you go. There's a QR. Oh, the Quizzard. All right. So all it's going to do is it's going to create a word cloud. And then what I like to do is use this as a way for us to review at the beginning of next class. Okay. So you can put anything you want on there and I'll try to go through it best as possible. All right. Was, yeah, it'll get scaled by how late you are. Hey, Raphael, leave your name tag. Thank you. All right, you guys are free to go. May the blessing of the Lord be upon you. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Yeah. My mom sent me an email right through like.
No. So many things that are for grades are the homework.
So if you want to still do this.
I don't, doesn't matter to me. It's to teach you how to use the
Oh,
system.
so if you don't use it, you don't.
No, you won't lose any points if you don't do it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And then just had a question, because then I could be using the semester for, I could begin the semester. I don't think for some side. So the schedule was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Now the class is Monday.
It's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday.
Not class.
No class on Wednesday.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I have a friend who he needs their grade to be rounded by 0.03 points. His professor doesn't want like